Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast series of HCLTech Aerospace and Defense Practice. Myself, Anshul Sharma, Industry Principal for A&D at HCLTech. And today I have with me Samit Guha, who is the Solution Manager and Aerospace and Defense Chapter Lead in our SAP Practice. So welcome, Sammy, to this podcast, and great to have you here.
Thank you.
Sami, as aerospace and defense companies begin their ERP transformation journey to S4 HANA, we are seeing because of the lack of A&D specific, industry specific configurations, enhancements, or templates and change management tools. This makes their implementation journey a bit challenging and exposes them to program risk. And I'm aware that to address this, HCL Tech has developed a solution accelerator specifically customized for aerospace and defense industry, which is Base 90 for aerospace and defense. So could you maybe walk us through this solution and tell us what is this Base 90 solution all about that we offer to our aerospace and defense customers?
Sure. Thank you for that. So within HCLTech, we have a suite of Base 90 applications, which are basically accelerators or best practices. One that we're going to talk about today is Base 90 for aerospace and defense, which is SAP partner qualified. So one of the challenges that a lot of companies have is SAP is agnostic to industry, and it's quite large. And so when you go into these activate phases, it's a bit time consuming to set up what you need and figure out how you need to narrow down some of the requirements for your workshops and such. So what we did at HCL is essentially look at it and say, all right, from project to project, we started noticing similar requirements coming up that the SAP best practice did not cover. And so what we did is between all the solution architects, we started identifying and listing out all the common requirements that we're seeing from client to client. That became the basis of Base 90 for aerospace and defense. Thus, when you implement SAP S4, you put in the SAP best practice, and then on top of that, you put in the Base 90 for aerospace and defense solution set, and acts as an accelerator. So it's an aspect that it comes with pre-configuration, starter kit on development objects and functional specs for gaps that we know clients constantly ask for. And so it comes in and basically helps reduce the time and prepare phase as well as explore phase. And so it's there to really help reduce the time and get you into build and realize a lot faster and more efficiently as you can start looking at saying, all right, instead of trying to figure out what in SAP fits my industry, we tell you, all right, this is what the industry is constantly doing for these type of requirements. Do you fit within that, or do you need to deviate from that? And so those are the things that we help accelerate some of those discussion points, learning points, and those type of things.
Okay. Well, thanks for the quick introduction about Base 90, Sammy. So maybe could you elaborate on what are the aerospace and defense industry specific business processes that are actually included as part of this solution accelerator?
Yeah, the core solution, which will be enhanced, where we have pre-configured configuration in for the business processes, the area like supply chain, manufacturing, production planning, procurement, and sales and project systems. It's all based on the methodology of how you want to deploy via Activate, right? It's one of those things where we give you a system where it goes in, you can start your workshops, figure out what's a fit, what's a gap, and those type of things, right? It's there to organize a rapid deployment. The 90, I know it's a joke, but 90 basically predicates that we've covered 90% of the industry requirements, and 10 of them are customer configuration, right? Or custom client configuration. Because we know that it's never going to be 100% because every A&D client has a unique process for certain things. So it's supposed to be just there to help you really get you to the finish line faster and more efficient. Because like I said, we provide you workshops, we provide you an A&D academy, we provide you with pre-configuration systems and test scripts and everything. So that way you can go into your prepare phase is reduced significantly. Your explorer phase, you can go straight into your requirements to look at these unique A&D processes, right? Like SAP doesn't handle U.S. government requirements, but we identify some of those things, right? Final assembly with primer effectivity, which is very unique to aerospace and defense. GPD slash PMO. Those are unique things that come into A&D space that SAP doesn't handle. So those are certain things that we provide and collaborate and put in, because one key thing is SAP gives you modular standpoint. We look at it, what is your business practice that goes through one or many SAP modules, right?
Mhm.
Because in the end, you're designing and implementing business, you're designing and implementing a integrated business process, right? And so it's an aspect of we give you a series of business processes that have tentacles to multiple requirements, workshops, and L3s.
Yeah. As a follow-up question to this, maybe could you give an example or a use case where base 90 could help our clients enable this time and cost saving for a particular business process, and particularly I would like to know how would it differ with a customer who is using a base 90 solution and one without a base 90 solution for that same business process.
Yeah. So, like I said, so Base 90 is built based on historical efforts on A&D clients, right? We started noticing clients are using the same thing over and over.
Hmm.
If you generally go in with a consulting firm that doesn't have the A&D background, you're going to start from ground zero. So you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out the requirements, trying to figure out how do you address them, and then set up the workshops to facilitate them. But this comes in and basically accelerates it decreases the timeline that you need to deliver it, right? So we've had a number of clients where the go live date is fixed. And so now that reduces your time for each of the activate phases, and it makes it a lot more difficult. Base 90 is perfect for those type of scenarios because when the go live is fixed and you backward schedule for that, the ability to use base 90 reduces some of the time frame required in the prepare and activate phase, right? And even in the realize phase, there's certain things that you may need to just not reinvent the wheel. You can just, like SAP best practice, tag and transport whatever you feel is required for your solution to go down the road, right? And so these are some of the benefits that come into the fact that when you look at it, one, base 90 is a representation of HCL skill sets in this space, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things to find globally is people who can speak A&D, right? There's a lot of people who can speak SAP, but not that many that can speak aerospace and defense. So base 90 for aerospace and defense, one is, if you look at it, one, yes, SAP has given HCL this star saying that, all right, we're partner qualified for aerospace and defense. But at the same time, it's a representation of the skill set that HCL brings, right? It's basically showing you this is SAP's, HCL's experience in the aerospace and defense market. And then this is built upon the backs of SAP's HCL consultants. So it's a good representation of what we bring to the table and how we know to accelerate the timeline. So when you have a unique scenario where a fixed go live, you can backward schedule, we can accommodate that. Or if you have a client that's brand new to SAP, the fact that we have the A&D Academy, we can put them through the Academy, which is SAP best practice, with an A&D spin on it. So that way the people coming to the workshops will have uh, better value questions, meaning they're not coming to the workshop using it as a training session. They've already
Yeah.
seen what SAP can do in the A&D space. So now they can focus truly on the requirement and see, all right, what can you do for me?
Yeah. Uh, in my previous question, you did mention about some of the very A&D specific processes and terminology like GPD, PMMO. So specifically, for base 90 for aerospace and defense, uh, what are the kind of benefits that are being realized by our customers after implementation of base 90?
So I think it's more the fact that, like I said, some of the biggest time consuming items is a gap, right?
Hmm.
Things that may not fit into the space. So the benefit that a lot of the clients get is we provide a lot of the documentation and rationale as to why we've configured certain things. And the same
Hmm.
thing with development objects, right? We give you a starter kit and certain gaps for development where you can start and proceed. Now, if you look at it historically, uh, I've been in SAP in aerospace and defense since 2000. Now, if you look back at a lot of the clients that we've been on, there's a bit of an attrition, right?
Hmm.
And so a lot of the people who were there when we deployed it are no longer there. And so now with the documentation and the stuff that we provide, it's already boilerplate where the new people can come in, understand what they've done, understand why they've done it, and be able to carry it forward. Right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of clients that I've seen now, even when they move from ECC to S4, where the documentation is sparse and the people have left. And so the
Mhm.
value that we bring is we've already done a lot of the documentation ahead of time on top of the configuration and development that we've given you. So it's their repository for you to use 20 years after you've gone live.
Yeah. And now we are seeing several of the A&D companies moving to S4 HANA. So is Base 90 available for those who are still on the SAP ECC platform? And
Yes. Yeah.
okay.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, no, and just to follow up, what are the deployment options available for the same?
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
similar. So in the sense where in an ECC landscape, there's no best practice in ECC. So that's one unique
Yeah.
thing, right? In S4, SAP finally got smart and built a baseline best practice. They call it scope
Mhm.
items. But in ECC, they only had building blocks, and
Mhm.
still it was less than a best practice. So in ECC, we created what's called ready to make. And so
Okay.
in that, we basically built the SAP best practice and there, and then we have a BPML that's quite extensive, like 132 BPML level threes. And with that,
Mhm.
similar to S4, we basically built out all the A&D gaps that covered it in the ECC space, right? And similar to we have workshop material and all those type of things. And so those are things that you get in the ECC space because, like I said, we were proactive back then to know that, all right, SAP is missing a lot of this. Let's build out everything. And then as time went on, and when SAP got smart with the best practices, we started looking at it and saying, all right, from an S4 standpoint, what is still relevant from an A&E perspective, and what is now being covered by SAP? And so our BPML is now more focused to the gaps that A&D has, and we are now more pivoted to the aspect of we have a series of integrated business processes that span across the BPML that give
Mhm.
you this is how you're going to do final assembly with primer effectivity. This is how you're going to do complex manufacturing. And so those are the evolutions and the opportunities that you get with Base 90 as well as ready to make in an S4 environment or an ECC environment.
Okay. And at an enterprise level, what is the typical timeline we see for this implementation of Base 90?
That I can't tell you. Generally, it's more the aspect of the scope of work that we have, right?
Mhm.
And so it's one of the things where each client is different in how many requirements, how big the scope's going to be. And so what Base 90 basically focuses on is, all right, on these key A&D processes, this is what will accelerate, right? So we can talk about where, like I said, 90% of it is we've covered in Base 90 and ready to make. 10% generally is customer differentiation. Can't say the word differentiation,
Yeah.
but there's always going to be requirements that are outside of what we have, right? And so that's a key thing where the messaging shouldn't be based on these all encompassing. Every
Yeah.
client has a unique process that they always do that's outside of the normal industry standards, right? And so that's why it's not fair for me to say this percentage is reduced. I can give you the perspective on what the scope that we are providing that lines up with that scope that the client has.
Mhm. In terms of the common SAP white spaces which are being identified by A&D clients, what are the enhancements that we are seeing in Base 90?
So again, A&E is quite unique, and so there's certain things that we've done in the space of ready to make and base 90 where since it's predicated on primer effectivity, which is part of the dim switch in ECC and that's automatically turned on in S4, that is very unique to the aerospace and defense space. And so there's a series of development objects which we've built around the dim switch. So
Mhm.
we have things like rate-based planning workbench, which is doing master production scheduling by rate and tack against a model and a series of tail numbers, right? That walks you through how the complex object goes down the bird farm by manufacturing station and position. We have another enhancement that in MDO4, which is an MRP screen, where you see the
Mhm.
pegging segment demand and supply. we put in an enhancement where it looks at the parameter effectivity values for that demand and supply, and
Mm-hmm.
basically shows you what is the parameter effectivity for that demand and supply. Because every client may not do the WBS structure the same, where in base 90, we put in the WBS structure as model dash tail number. But
Mm-hmm.
that's just a recommendation. Knowing that's a recommendation, we put in the columns for parameter effectivity so that way you can see, all right, what is the WBS element for the pegging segment? What is my demand? What is my supply? And then on the right of the screen, you can see the parameter effectivity value that's stored in TechS for that object, right? We provide a planning report which basically says, all right, I'm going to enter in my model and serial number, and it will show you by that network all the installs and all the make to order, buy to order parts below it and its progress. When I say progress, you put in a traffic light of red, meaning it hasn't started, yellow, meaning that it's in process, and then green, meaning it's been completed, right? So you can see the progress of all the shop orders related to that effectivity by station, right? Um, we are we just had a partner qualification in the space of base 90 with PEO, right? So we're extending base 90 to have a A&D best practice in the PEO space from that standpoint. And same thing, we're doing base 90 for A&D in the PMO for mid-market companies. And so there's just certain things where base 90 is the core, and then we have a series of configuration and enhancements that build out the core. And then now we're extending it to other footprints where there are gaps in the A&D space, where PEO, again, is also industry agnostic. And we put it
Mm-hmm.
out there. For PMMO, it's built off of GPD. And so we built the mid-market structure of how you'd want to do PMO and GPD, right? And there's certain things where we haven't developed things, but we've put together functional specs. So like simple things that large companies like Cognizant or Dassault, Dacian would cover. We're providing at least starter points because they may be not cost effective, right? So we put together some functional specs like contract flow down. We've given you some starter kits from a functional standpoint, saying, all right, if you don't want to pay for a Cognizant or a Dacian for those type of enhancements, we've got some homegrown functional specs which you can take and start building yourself. So we give you a caveat of, all right, here's some configuration, here's some advanced development, here's some integration, and then some functional specs that you may want to take ahead on your own. And it gives you the ability to take that and go forward and make your journey a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Just one last question, Sammy. From a commercial and defense perspective, do you see any difference in terms of the concerns from A&D, your clients and customers, from a gaps perspective in base 90, specifically talking about defense
Right.
customers? Yeah.
So I will say that. So the tool set that we give it fits both the commercial space and the defense space. But the
Mm-hmm.
defense space generally has a little more rigor, right? They
Yeah.
have more things that they have to be focused on earned value management, right? Cleanse, where they have to manage the cost to associate contract line item for material
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. They have to deal with GPD/PMO to see actual costs from the top down. Because an example could be in the commercial space, they have make to order and buy to order, which are pegged to a project stock to tail number. And then they'll
Mm-hmm.
have non-configurable items, which are make to stock and buy to stock, which are plant stock items, which are moving average and they're not pegged to anything. And so you don't know the full cost of everything top to down. You only know the cost for anything that's configurable. In the defense space, they want to know the cost all the way from top to down, bottom. And so they'll treat the full bill of material as pegged to a group WBS based on a grouping strategy and CLIN, and they'll manage the costs following the part wherever it's assigned to. And so there are nuances where the government has a lot more rigor and restrictions than commercial, but base 90 at a core will help satisfy both. And like I said, the fact that we've extended base 90 to cover PMMO and certain things in PEO it helps address some of those things that are A&D defense specific.
Yeah. Well, Samit, thank you so much for your insights on our Base 90 solution accelerator. And it was great speaking to you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all in our next podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks.